The new podcast, In the Shadow of Princeton, starts as the matriarch of a prominent Princeton family is found stabbed to death in her locked basement. Investigators look from a serial attacker to her family to Princeton University students. One hot-blooded investigator sees a conspiracy. Is he way off base, or does privilege let you get away with murder? In the Shadow of Princeton is available wherever you get podcasts, or you can binge it ad-free by joining Wondery Plus in the Wondery app, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify.
This episode is brought to you by United Airlines. When you want to make the most of your vacation, book with United. They're an airline that cares about your travels as much as you do. United is transforming the flying experience with Bluetooth connectivity, screens, power at every seat, and bigger overhead bins to help fit everyone's bag. And with their app, you can skip the bag check line, get live updates, and more. Change the way you fly. Book your next trip today at united.com.
Hello, hello. Welcome back to Peak Northwest, an outdoors and travel podcast by the Oregonian and Oregon Live, dedicated to the adventure and exploration of our beautiful Pacific Northwest. I'm Jamie Hale.
And I'm Vicki Connor. Together, we take you to some of the most beautiful and interesting destinations in our region, discussing where to go, what to do, and places to see. And today, in honor of Halloween, we are bringing you some of the spookiest hikes in Oregon.
Vicki, I did write spooky voice into the script for that spooky, and I don't know that you totally went for it, and I do understand why you didn't.
Listen, I was like, in my head, I was like, let me go for some type of like vibrato right now. But then I didn't know if I could pull it off. So in order to save everyone's ears.
That's okay. That's okay. So, well, look, I'll admit right off the bat that this spooky hikes idea was kind of a seasonal shoehorn. So, I mean, I don't typically find like natural settings particularly spooky. Like I really earnestly am calmed by a dark and misty forest. Like I feel like I could just like crawl up in there on a bed of moss and go to sleep. But like I know everybody doesn't feel that way. Some people, in fact, like to feel creeped out. So we went ahead, because Halloween is today that this podcast is coming out. We went ahead and rounded up some of the spookiest hikes we could find around Oregon.
Oh my gosh. I don't know. There's something that makes any hike kind of spooky when I'm the only person out there, especially
Fair.
if I'm by myself.
That's fair. Yeah, I do recognize that, like, as like a white man, I with like some experience in the outdoors, that like I have like things are generally going to be less scary for me outside on the trail. So I do recognize that, but I was trying to think about like what does make a hike like spooky, like vibe wise. Right. This time of year, like you go out and you have kind of like that dark, misty, the leaves are falling and you kind of get the form of the trees and these, like the branches are all gnarled and I don't know, like that, there's like that kind of spooky.
Yeah.
But like Vicki, what else? I mean, what in your head, what makes a hike spooky?
Yeah, if there's some type of infrastructure on the trail that looks very much abandoned and like dark and formidable, I don't know. There's something that it's just like you're approaching it, slowly walking, and you're like, someone could be hiding in there, or it could be, who knows what happened there, and your mind starts to make up these scenarios, and that is what makes something spooky in my head. But it also has to be in that setting of, big forest, little fog, and no one else around me.
Yeah, there's like the haunted house factor, right? These old buildings or like, weird hiding places. Cause like, I feel like if I'm just in the woods, in the wilderness, I don't expect to see anybody. And then it's just like me and the animals. But like, as soon as there's like a weird old building, I'm like, oh, somebody has been here / is here. And then all of a sudden, like the scary movie tropes start playing in my head, and you never know who's gonna pop out from where, with what intentions. It can get, real scary really quickly that way.
How often have you actually ever like encountered that type of situation?
Yeah, never. Absolutely never. Like literally every time I've encountered another person on the trail, we've just like done that sort of like smile and half muttered, "Hello, how are you doing? Have a nice day." You know what we're talking, like the trail hello. Everyone's super nice and cool out there. I've not, I think unless you're going out to like some weird old, backcountry hunting sites. Like I've heard every now and then a couple stories of things going wrong out there, with people and trucks and guns or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like,
yeah.
I've never experienced anything bad out there.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. We're not going to completely freak out anyone over the next.
No scary stories today. Just some potentially spooky places if you're the kind of person who gets spooked out by this sort of thing. So we've got 5 spots here on this list today. And I want to start with what, for me, is the number one scariest place. We're doing a reverse list. We're starting with the top here.
Okay.
We've talked about these on the podcast a couple of times at least. But the military batteries on the North Coast, like around the mouth of the Columbia River, these old abandoned concrete bunkers built into like the hillsides of the coastline with like these deep, dark tunnels full of like little dark rooms where there's no lights at all. And it's just like part of the trail. All these like old rusted doors with like locks on them and bars on windows that are like all boarded up. It's spooky out there. And I get that like some military buffs, out there, everybody's dad and grandpa loves this stuff. And that's cool. But like, it's scary. And I don't like going out there, to be honest.
Oh man. Yeah. And so specifically we've talked prior about Fort Stevens State Park and the bunker there. And I think also just like the proximity to, just the ocean and, how the ocean can just be creepy because of its vastness and like all of its strength and potential. I think that also makes it a little freaky to me. But yeah, usually you're just like, what could be hiding in there? I don't know. It's dark and damp and
Absolutely not.
And also me as like someone who's not a history buff, then I just start like making up scenarios in my head of creepy stuff that could have happened in the past.
So yeah, we're talking about Fort Stevens State Park, and then just across the Columbia in Washington, Cape Disappointment State Park. You have military batteries on both those areas. And you have some opportunities to walk down some dark tunnels. You can wander around those, like I said, some concrete bunkers, just a lot of abandoned infrastructure. These like places where like there were cannons. And this is like mostly World War II stuff. It also dates back, I want to say, to the Civil War, some of these areas. Once that there were like, governments and armies and militaries on the Columbia River, there was people who wanted to protect it with weapons. So that is also kind of generally just scary. So
very true. So that's all out on the coast, and I figure let's get a little bit closer to Portland here. What's next on our list?
Well, speaking of like abandoned infrastructure and buildings, I think the one that most people think about in the Portland area is what's known as either the Stone House, if you want to be proper about it, or if you want to be, spooky about it, you can call it by its other name, the Witch's Castle.
The Witch's Castle. I think we have mentioned this in the past, and I'm like, oh, it sounds creepy. And also, I haven't been there before. And you're just like, it's an old bathroom.
It's an old bathroom. If you want to be, let's get our cards on the table. This is an old bathroom. That's what I've been told anyway by Portland Parks. That was built out there at some point, and then was abandoned and has sort of fallen into ruin. But it's a cool looking ruin, I gotta say. Just like this, it's a stone building. It's kind of like half fallen apart. The stones are all covered in like moss, and it's kind of in the middle of the woods. It's very cool, but it looks very spooky. And these days, though, it's also the other aesthetic piece of this is that it's typically covered in graffiti. like all the time, very brightly colorful graffiti. So it's like, it's funny because it's sort of like this, like, spooky storybook ruin, but then it's just like covered in brightly colored spray paint. So it's a really, I don't know, it's an interesting spot, but people, of course, because of the way it looks, have made all kinds of stories about it. And I don't know, like it's a bit silly, I think, but it's also, it's one of the more interesting, like, abandoned landmarks that's like so easy to get to. Like, you don't have to like cross into any private property to get there. It's just right there on the trail.
Yeah. And so can you go inside of it now, or what's the scenario?
Yeah. I mean, it's all like open.
Okay.
There's no like, roofs or walls to speak of. It's just like, there's some like little open rooms. And there's like, you can walk up these stairs that lead to the second story. And there's like, just these sort of like, stone archways and stuff. So it's right there. It's very accessible, and it seems like there's no interest in making it inaccessible. I mean, they've even added some like guardrails, I think, up there, so it's more safe for people to be on. So this is like firmly a part of like the trail and a part of the park at this point.
Gotcha.
So I don't know. It's like in that, I don't, does that make it less spooky though? This is what I want to know, because it's like so accepted by like, the parks department. Is it like not that spooky actually?
I feel if they're putting up guardrails, yeah. Once the guardrails are installed, spooky factor out.
Boy, yeah. And there's so many people there. Like, if you go there today, you're going to be there with like a dozen other people at least.
Yeah. I think if this was somewhere that was less heavily trafficked, that would be a bit spookier. But if there's always people around there, less opportunity for a witch to jump out.
Well, we're here to undercut our own spooky hikes today. But it's a cool thing. It's a cool landmark. And if you are in the Portland area and you have not seen it, it is cool. And it's part of a really great hike in Forest Park. It's this like Lower McClay trail to the Wildwood Trail. And from there you can hike up to Pittock Mansion. It's like the best, like, go-to hike in Portland. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful hike. So do check it out.
Yeah. Do you know about how long it takes to get to the Witch's Castle, or like
if you're starting at Lower McClay Park, it's like, it's really not far. I want to say it's like, like a 15, 20-minute walk or something. I don't quote me on that. But like it's a really short walk from Lower McClay Park. If you start in other parts of the Wildwood Trail, it'll take you a little bit longer, but it's really not that far.
All right. Where are we headed to next?
Okay. Well, when I was thinking about spooky hikes, Vicky, I was like, what are the times that I have been out there and I have been like legitimately scared? And there's not a ton. Again, I do find nature very relaxing.
Yeah.
But the one time I could really think of was when I was trying to go do some cave exploring by myself into the dark with like not the best sources of illumination, and just like stepping into the darkness, the pitch black darkness of a cave where I don't know what is in there and I cannot see what's in there. I do remember like my whole body freezing up and stopping, and a couple of times going into caves, I had to say, I physically can't force myself to do it. I have to turn around and go back. And that was like the only time I've had that experience, was in some caves. As we're talking here in October, most of the caves in Oregon are closed. So you actually can't do a lot of caving in like the spooky season, because bat habitat, they close them to save the hibernating bats, which is very good. We like that. I did find a good year-round cave though.
Okay.
And these are the Redmond Caves. So just outside of, or really in Redmond in Central Oregon, the Redmond Caves are open year-round. They're managed by the BLM. And there are like several different caves within this cave system that you can explore. So like it seems like a really cool, like it's a lava tube. So there's like really cool like formations and some interesting places you can go explore in the Redmond Caves.
That's awesome. Also, okay, so I'm looking at your story about this, Jamie, right now. From the picture, it looks like it's like, out there somewhere. But then on the map, it looks like it's close to the airport.
Yeah.
And also close to the original pancake house of Redmond.
Hey, that's a day right there. Do some caving, eat some pancakes. That's what I'm talking about.
Oh my gosh. So it is like, where is it in relation to, is it off the beaten path a bit, or how? I'm trying to imagine where this would be.
I've the caveat that I've not been there myself, just looking at like all the maps here, it looks like, it's really right next to the Redmond airport. It is like in town. And there seems to be like a little trailhead just off the road there, by the airport. And you can just walk up to the caves. I would say like not off the beaten path at all.
Right.
Really, really in town.
Yeah.
But again, once you get into the caves, it's, a different kind of situation. Then you're really in this sort of like, preserved natural area where there's like, a lot of risk. So, walking around in caves in general, they say you should have 3 sources of light, which is a lot. You got to have sturdy shoes because that, especially in these lava tubes, the ground is like really sharp and rocky in places. No flip flops in these caves. And also in the Redmond Caves, they say, hey, watch out for rattlesnakes because snakes love to live in like rocky areas like that. So you got to worry about snakes also. So if it's the dark that scares you, or like the sharp rocks that scare you, it might be the snakes. There's plenty there to be spooked out by.
The snakes will do it for me. Yes, so that is absolutely it.
Oh my gosh. So Redmond Caves, I think, I don't know, this maybe we should be closer to the top of the list. This is definitely spookier than Witch's Castle. So let's move that up a little bit too on our spooky hike ranking.
Yep.
But moving down the list here, this is one I did not put in my original story. I think I meant to, and I just forgot. But wildfire burn areas. Vicky, how much time have you spent hiking around these burn areas out here?
It's the sad truth that like inevitably kind of you'll find it. You'll find some type of burn area, whether it's in the gorge or elsewhere, or like over the summer when I was backpacking through like Three Sisters Wilderness area, there's some significant burn there too. And it's just, it's spooky and sad at the same time.
Yeah. So maybe sadder than spookier, but like speaking of the spooky side of that coin, walking these trails where you have like just the forest is just these charred black toothpicks.
Yeah.
And like you can really see the contours of the land. Like I remember hiking to Triple Falls in the gorge it was like in February or something. It was a little bit icy and probably not the best time to go, but like just like bare rock, charred trees, brown landscape, gray clouds. And like the shapes that these charred trees would make, where they were kind of like mangled and gnarled and like had all these crazy like weird shapes cut into their trunks, and it was just really spooky.
It's almost that kind of like apocalyptic feeling spookiness.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, are there specific places that you're thinking of, like Triple Falls, or like other places that have a significant burn area you're thinking about?
Triple Falls came to mind. Angel's Rest also came to mind.
Oh yeah.
A lot of stuff in the Eagle Creek burn area in particular, where it just really got devastated. There's plenty of places where like you see some burned trees, in parts of the hike, but then it, turns into these really beautiful forests and all this stuff. But I think the gorge in particular, with just those sheer cliffs and like all of that rock and those like burned trees that got so destroyed, that area in particular, I think is really, really, it shows what kind of this sort of scary scene that we're painting here.
And is all of that burn area was that 2020 or when was that?
2017.
2017.
Eagle Creek Fire. Yeah.
Yes.
So
okay.
it's to the point now where a lot of those trails are back open because it's now been, 7 years. So you can really get a sense of what they're like now. A lot of times, like the wildfires burn and it takes a few years to reopen, and in that time there's some regenerative growth, and that's true of the Eagle Creek area too. Like there's certainly some moss and underbrush growing out there now, but in some of those areas that were really, really devastated, it is, and especially when this time of year when it is gray and kind of drizzly, it has a vibe to it that is not for everyone.
Agreed. Especially if you're like taking people out to that area who are unfamiliar with like the wildfires that happened and they're expecting like lush greenery. It's shocking.
Yeah. Gosh, you got to warn people before you go out there.
Yeah. They're like, what happened here? This is not the Oregon I was thinking about.
Well, last on our list here, our list of 5, perhaps a surprising one to some folks, but the backcountry of Silver Falls State Park. We did a whole episode on the backcountry of Silver Falls. So people go to Silver Falls and the Trail of 10 Falls, South Falls, all the big waterfalls. But the state park is like largely this kind of like very little visited backcountry forest where there's trails that kind of meander for a long time throughout that area. But there's not anything really spectacular to speak of. It's just like trees and trees and trees and trees and trees and trees and trees.
Yeah.
So like, why is this spooky? But there's something to that, right, Vicky? There's something like about that, like, woods where there's no one, where you're all alone, right? We were kind of alluding to that earlier in the episode. Do you find that sort of thing spooky?
Yes, I personally do. Because I'm feeling like I need to constantly check over my shoulder. I start, imagining I'm in some type of jumpy, scary movie where someone's just going to jump out and scare me. So yeah, there's something like, at a certain point, I do find just the silence and, sounds of nature to be relaxing. But then if I think a little too hard about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, anything could be out here lurking.
You're not alone in feeling that way because this area in Silver Falls specifically has been used for several scary movies. 2.5 maybe. I don't know if you consider Twilight a scary movie.
Yeah.
It's about vampires and werewolves, so you'd be like, oh yeah, that's like I don't know if that's really a scary movie.
Yeah.
But it was used for the 2003 thriller The Hunted, starring Tommy Lee Jones. Did you see that one, Vicky?
I did not, but the name sounds, oh geez.
I think it's from what I could tell in the trailer, it's like, sort of dudes like tracking each other through the woods, and it's kind of like The Fugitive, but in Silver Falls. And it also was a setting for the 1981 slasher flick Just Before Dawn.
Not the slasher flick.
Which I looked at the trailer for that, and it does look like such a cheesy 80s slasher movie. But like it also seems to have like a pretty good reputation amongst people in that community. They're like, oh, that's a classic.
Yeah.
I don't know. I that's not my cup of tea, but it sort of seems like, a bunch of young people go to the woods and they get picked off one by one. So Silver Falls, people have gone in there and thought, great place to film a horror movie.
Yeah.
So I think that alone.
I did not know this about Silver Falls, that it was such a spot. And also I feel like, a lot of people and even some of my friends who come out to visit, they grew up in the age of being a Twihard fan, and we go to Indian Beach and they have the placard set up saying that Twilight was filmed there. But I feel like Silver Falls backcountry is a bit of a sleeper on that front.
It's the thing is that Twilight filmed like everywhere.
Yeah,
there's like so many places that like have Twilight connections. So I think when you think of these spooky places, I don't think about Silver Falls usually. There's so many people, and it's just, I think, hits you in the face beautiful.
Yeah.
But hey, head out to that backcountry, get one of those cabins. Like when I stayed in the cabin in this Silver Falls backcountry, I was the only person staying in those cabins. It was like the dead of winter.
Yeah.
And it was like real dark and I couldn't see lights anywhere. And like something was rustling underneath of the building. And it was definitely, I mean, I don't know. I was like, oh, cool, a raccoon. But I can see how that can be a really, really scary experience for some people. Yeah. So if that's your cup of tea, go for it. This is your time. It's your time to shine. But if that's not for you, maybe perhaps go to Silver Falls and with a group of people or in maybe the summer.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, totally. So we just listed off 5 different places or, ideas of hikes to be spooked out a little bit. But obviously there are so many corners of this state that could be potentially creepy. Kind of listing off some additional ones, Jamie. What else are you thinking?
Ecola State Park is a good one. I just feel like that's like a great, like, the mist rolls in off the ocean and you're hiking along these like, jagged cliffs along this deep, dark forest.
I agree.
You walk up to the hikers camp in Ecola, which is like just like a group of small wooden shelters where you can ostensibly spend the night. No, thank you. That's spooky enough. But then like, there's also a view of like the Tillamook Rock Lighthouse, Terrible Tilly, as they call it, where there are like, urns of like, human remains out there. I guess cremains, they're cremated. It's not like there's bodies out there. So like, that's also pretty spooky. I think Ecola has a lot of spooky stuff going on there.
Yeah. Not to mention, I feel like just recently I had to edit a video of like a surfer being saved nearby. Oh my gosh, and just seeing the waves crash against, the rocks. That was so scary to see. There
are like few things scarier in Oregon than like the power of the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
That, and I have people coming from out of town. They're like, oh, like I want to go get in the water. I'm like, don't do that.
Especially this time of year.
Go to California if you want to be in the ocean. This is not the place for that. So yeah, I mean, Ecola is definitely a spot. And the other place I had on my list was the Hobbit Trail, which is also on the Oregon coast. It's near the Heceta Head Lighthouse. It's sort of like, people think about it as like sort of fantasy-like natural setting with like, really small, narrow passageways that you kind of have to crouch through sometimes, like you're a hobbit. Oh. And so like on a summer day, it's like sort of like, ooh, fun. And it goes right out to the beach. It's pretty cool. But like, on like a misty, dark fall day, all those like really dark underbrush areas, can be pretty spooky. So, I think that's a good contender also.
Are you planning to get out to any of these anytime soon, Jamie?
we have some friends coming in from out of town and we want to go somewhere like, locally for a hike. And I was thinking maybe the Witch's Castle is a good one to do. It'll be just around Halloween time when they're here. And that's like a pretty easy trail. It's a good one for like people who want to just do like get into the woods for a second. So you know what? I might do that.
Sounds like a great option. Don't have to travel too far. There you go.
Exactly. What about you, Vicky?
I've been meaning to go out to the coast at some point this fall. So we'll see. Maybe, probably like Ecola is what I'm thinking. But yeah, I don't know if I can convince myself to walk around the military batteries.
I mean... Yeah, you don't want to go out to Redmond and go in those caves?
Not with potential rattlesnakes. Although I feel like rattlesnakes are starting to hide away for the season. So
that's the thing. This is not rattlesnake season anyway. So
right.
As long as you don't stumble into a nest of rattlesnakes.
God, okay, we don't need to plant that idea in my head. But I'm not the biggest fan of caves, or I've never gone spelunking or anything like that. So the tight quarters, I would really have to be yearning to be spooked to get out there.
Yeah, that's literal nightmare stuff for me, and I'm no thank you. Absolutely not. But for folks, if you're into this, people, there's lots of places obviously to go be a little scared out in nature. You don't need to go to a haunted house. I mean, support your local haunted house also, but you don't have to if you don't want to. you can find that spookiness just right there in nature. Well, folks, that will do it for us for today. Until next time, you can watch our videos on the Oregonians YouTube channel and view all of our travel and outdoors coverage on OregonLive.com/travel, as well as HereIsOregon.com.
Please leave us a rating or review if you enjoy the show. And if you want to support this podcast as well as our local journalism, please consider a subscription to Oregon Live. You can find details at OregonLive.com/podsupport. Also, if you're a fan of the show and you're interested in potentially sponsoring it, you can get in touch with our marketing people at advertise@oregonian.com. This episode of the show was produced by me, Mickey Connor, alongside Jamie.
Stay safe and happy travels, everyone. Until next time, we leave you with this 10 seconds.